So hi, everyone. My name's Hannah, and I'm the Family Support and Education Officer here in TENI. And a large part of my work would be going into schools, supporting young people and their families through their transition and through the school system, and going into schools and supporting them as well. So today we're talking to Ronan. Hi, Ronan. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Hi.
So you have literally just finished going through the school system, am I right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you would have been sitting your leaving cert this year.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it hasn't gone to plan, but
Yeah. First of all, how do you feel about that? Is that good or is that bad that you didn't get to sit them?
oh, I am of course upset that I didn't get to, prove myself and sit the exams, and I won't be able to say like, oh well, that's like I did that for a whole month and that's my achievement. But I know, like, I trust my teachers to give me the grades that I would have got anyway, so I'm not worried.
Yeah, the fair grades.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose that is. To be fair, you have actually, worked through and experienced something much more traumatic, I think, than the
Yeah.
leaving cert. So well done for coming out
Yeah.
nearly on the other side of that smiling. So can I ask, I suppose, first of all, did you come out during school?
Yeah, I came out at the start of TY, so I would have been 15. Um, yeah, that's when I
And
came
and
out.
and, and how was that? How was that received? What was the process with your school?
Yeah, so I was in an all-girls school,
Okay.
so it was a bit more awkward, I guess. So first of all, I came out to my principal and our two vice principals, and my parents were there as well. So we just had like a small meeting where I kind of just told everyone who was kind of important. And they all took it really well. The one issue was with the trousers, because it was an all girls school. There weren't actually trousers available apart from the PE uniform. So they did allow me there and then. They said the next day I could come in wearing the tracksuit bottoms, which was great at the time. Um, and I actually asked my vice principal to announce it to my year, just because I was still quite shy and introverted back then. So I did ask her to tell everybody for me, and she handled it really well. Everyone was brilliant, and I didn't have any major issues. So it
Yeah.
was a really good experience.
And in terms of, because that's a really common thing in girls' schools, is that the uniform tends to be a skirt or a pinafore, and the tracksuit is an option. But obviously, that's kind of singling you out in some ways as well, isn't it? Have they changed their policy towards uniforms since you came out?
No, they haven't. What happened was, for the whole of TY, I was wearing the school jumper and the tracksuit bottoms with it, which didn't look great, obviously. So then at the start of fifth year, we actually had a whole school inspection. So there were inspectors coming in to look at the school and how everything was running and things. So I said to my principal, like, what do you want me to do? Like, I don't really feel comfortable an inspector coming in and looking at me and thinking that I'm not in my right uniform.
Mm.
So at that point, she did say, well, go back to the shop where our uniforms are sold, and they actually did already have a pair of trousers for a different school, but it was in the same colour as our uniform. So I was
Okay.
allowed to wear kind of proper uniform trousers after that, but I knew it was only because uh, of the evaluation. I knew if that wasn't happening, I probably wouldn't have got anything else. So it was disappointing that it had to happen that way and that they couldn't have done anything before that. But
Yeah.
I mean, I was happy that I did end up getting actual trousers in the end. So
Yeah, what I always find really surprising, because of obviously the trans boys are going to want to wear trousers, but there has to also be uh, at least a general amount of the girls who are uncomfortable wearing skirts as well. They're not the most practical thing to wear to school anyway. And so I always think that having a gender neutral option is beneficial to everybody, because a lot of people feel uncomfortable in skirts. And I know that some girls' schools are moving towards that way. I suppose, yeah, it's a little bit disappointing to hear that your school hasn't made that leap, especially after your experience. I would have thought that would be a really supportive move from them.
Yeah. And there was somebody in my year who was trying to have trousers implemented for the whole school, but the board of management ended up making it really. They just didn't make it an easy process for us. They kind of said like, oh well, you'll have to do a whole school like survey to see who would actually wear them, and if those results don't come out perfectly, then we can't even consider it. And they just made it a really awkward process. And the one thing that annoyed me was that I was able to go to the place where we get our uniforms, and they actually already had a pair of trousers that I was able to wear. So I
Yeah,
was just annoyed that like the option was actually there, but they weren't giving it to us.
yeah.
So that, yeah.
And it kind of makes you wonder who is school for, and what is, I always kind of go back to, if young people feel like they're not being heard, then how do they feel like that I don't know, one, how do they feel like they're being reflected back in the school system, and how do they feel like they're actually a part of what's happening in school rather than just being there, being told what to do. In terms of before you came out, can I ask how long, and I know that this is an impossible question, but around about when were you questioning, or have you always been questioning before you came out?
Yeah, so I think I started questioning around puberty. I think I would have been 12, 13. And I did start off questioning my sexuality before my gender. So that's kind of how I came about to questioning my gender, was that I knew I was attracted to girls, but I didn't feel comfortable being in a lesbian relationship. Like I knew that wasn't me. Like I that didn't sit right with me. So that's how I started questioning my gender.
So in that time period, I'm wondering how you felt in the school in terms of representations of gender and gender identity, or even gender stereotypes, any of that type of thing. Did it make a difference to you at school?
Well, there was one, the chaplain of my school was actually gay, and he was very open about that. Um, and he kind of served as like he kind of a counselor to a lot of people in the school. Like you could go and have a session with him and talk about things. So he was a really big support for me while I was questioning. Um, that was one positive aspect of that school. I really got a lot out of seeing somebody, because I had never really had met anybody LGBT before that I knew of. So that was a big help. But in terms of like gender stereotypes, I don't think there was that big of an impact in, like, I just don't think that was a big part of my life. Like I've always been, I was always a tomboy. So and I would always dress quite masculinely anyway. Obviously that wasn't really a problem in schools because of the uniform, but like I wasn't afraid to dress how I wanted or anything. So
Okay. And I had another question there on the, so in terms of support, so the school were really supportive, and
yes.
did they have an idea of a transition plan in place? Did they talk to just you and your family? Did they contact us, for instance? Did they contact TENI and ask for support? Do you know if any of that happened?
No, I don't think there was any contact with TENI, but there was the meeting when I came out, my parents were there, and that was kind of the, like, after that we didn't really discuss anything. I think they expected me to come to them if I
Okay.
had any problems or anything, which I did, but later on when I did have problems, but nothing was really done about it, which was,
So would it have been beneficial for them to even have given you maybe a person, or saying, if you have any issues, this is the person that you should approach? Or would it have been better if they were kind of checking in with you on a more regular basis?
Yeah, I think for me, checking in would have really helped, especially because my principal is so friendly and I really got on with her, and I really had a lot of respect for her. So like I would have loved just to check in just every once in a while, so she could see how I was doing. Because one of my biggest things was that um when I got into fifth year, I was the only out trans person in the whole school. So I really did want to have that contact with her, um so that she could have more experience just talking with trans people in case somebody came along after me and I wasn't there to consult, I guess, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think check-ins would have really helped.
Yeah, and I think that again, that would be something that I do experience, is that schools will do a lot in terms of helping a transition and helping through that social transition period. But when that, I suppose, has culminated, you know, and you're going to school as yourself, and name change, pronoun change, all of that, that quite often that's where the support seems to stop. And from the school's point of view, they probably don't feel like they're stopping, because obviously they would think that, like you have just voiced, if you have a problem, you would come to them. But I think it's more about taking that proactive approach and letting you know that, you know, this is, or even letting you choose who would you feel comfortable going and talking to if you had a problem. So this is your mentor, this is who you can approach, and you can go and talk to them anytime. And maybe, and for the principal to maybe do that, you know, every couple of months, just to, you know, just to see, is everything okay, is there anything that we can improve, do you feel supported? That those are important steps to take as well. And in terms of outside support, so that's in school, were you receiving any outside supports during your time at school?
I was going to a therapist on and off, but you know, it wasn't anything, I didn't have any major issues. So yeah, I think my mental health did improve a lot after I came out. I didn't feel like I needed any extra support.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And have you been to any of the, I know that you've been going to the Transformers since they
Yeah.
happened online. Were you going to the Transformers group when it was in person as well?
Yeah, I usually, well, in sixth year, the past year has been quite, I did focus a lot on my studying, so I didn't go every month. I did miss a lot of it this year, but before that I would have gone most of the time, yeah.
So I suppose, because this education is in our strategic plan, and I think it's a continuation of what we've already been doing. You know, we go in and we do trans awareness training for the teachers, and we would like to do a follow-up to that as well, so that they get that more in-depth, that continuation of support, I suppose, is, I think, key, so that they maybe get the foundation of, you know, of what it means to be transgender or gender diverse. And then after that, they can revisit that, as well as looking at how, on a continuous basis, they can be, you know, supporting their trans and gender diverse students. Would you have any tips or any advice for schools, you know, going forward? Is there anything that you feel your school could have done better, or any advice you have for other schools?
Yeah, I think the main thing in my school, this is kind of more for same-sex schools. My biggest issue was teachers saying girls and ladies and all that kind of gendered language.
Yeah.
That was a real issue for me, and I didn't feel, I approached the senior management team in my school multiple times about it. I talked to individual teachers about it, and I never saw any change. They would always say, like, oh, almost victimizing themselves, like, oh, it's so hard for me, you know, I've been teaching in this school however many years, and this is just what I'm used to, and it's nothing against you. But I just felt like it was against me. Like I wasn't asking them to change their whole method of teaching. I was just asking them to stop saying girls. I mean, even just around me, that would have been fine.
Yeah.
And so that was the biggest thing for me, that it would have been nice to not have to have that thrown at me every day.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that in the mixed schools, it's probably everybody getting called lads and guys, actually. So we still gender it even in a mixed school, you know,
Mm.
and maybe not all, but I think that most tend to use that kind of gendered language as well. And I think that is a really good piece of advice. And it is difficult. It's okay to say that it's hard to change the way that you've been doing things, but that doesn't mean that we don't try to implement those changes. And I think that even if you saw teachers making mistakes, but you know, even once in a while saying folks or people instead of, you know, constantly using girls and ladies, you would feel that at least you were being heard. And I think that that's the really important thing, is that, you know, our young people really need to start feeling like they're being heard, because when you feel like even a small piece of change is, you know, trying to be achieved, then it relaxes you a bit, right?
Yeah, I think just that that I could tell like that some teachers were trying to make an effort, but some of them were kind of awkward about making mistakes, and I could tell that they didn't want to correct themselves because they felt awkward about it. But I just think like correcting yourself isn't a big deal. It doesn't have to be a big deal. Um, like I always really respected when teachers would say girls and then they'd say, oh sorry, I mean guys or folks or students. Even I really respected that, and it's something that made me feel more comfortable in school, even if like especially knowing that a teacher was making the effort. So I think like not to feel, for teachers not to feel that they would be attacked or like anything if they made a mistake, um because I think that's maybe how a lot of them feel.
Yeah.
um
And I think maybe that comes down to, well, I think it comes down to a couple of things. I think that in teacher training, you know, letting teachers know that your students don't need you to be the purveyor of all knowledge, and where you're, you know, kind of on the pedestal and you can't make mistakes. I think that a lot of teachers feel like they can't be seen to not know everything or to make mistakes, because as soon as you fall that little bit, then the kids are going to be on that and going, oh look, teacher made a mistake. That they need to kind of, you know, draw back from that a little bit, that, you know, to see some humanity is okay. And so I think we might wrap up.
yep.
If I can encapsulate, I think there's maybe uniforms, you know, gender neutral options for uniforms is a big thing for all of our young people. And especially, I suppose, in single gendered schools, because most mixed schools at this point do have a gender neutral option. And yeah, take the advice from the young people. If they're requesting something, then it's important to them. And it's really important that they feel like they're being supported and heard. And I think gendered language is a really important one going forward. That, you know, that's something that I will take into my workshops from here on in as well. That's a really important piece that you've given me. I know it in my own language, but yes, in schools, definitely that is something that needs to be looked at, or at least thought about. You know, the
Yeah.
process is you're thinking about it first and then trying to implement it a little bit. Um, and before you know it, it does become natural. You
Yeah.
know, it's practice, isn't it? Well, listen, thank you so much for talking to me today, Ronan. Um, yeah, I hope you get the grades that you were looking for. I'm
Thank
sorry that
you.
it wasn't the exam taking. You'll have to wait for university for that, I guess.
Yeah.
And that, I suppose that's the part, isn't it? That the Leaving Cert prepares you for that next stage of exams. But I'm sure you would have done brilliantly anyway. I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer.
Thanks.
and take care of yourself.
You too.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.